Welcome to the UK practical driving test, where you are going to learn everything that you will need for your driving test day. Now, the UK driving test is there to determine whether or not we are ready to hit those roads on our own. And it's obviously very disappointing if we don't get the result we want first time. Now, in a lot of cases, this can be easily avoided with a bit of preparation. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's make sure we've got everything we need to give us the best possible chance on the day. Here's a list of everything you are going to need for your driving test. Number one, if you need glasses, make sure you bring them. You do not want to risk failing the eyesight test, as the driving test will not go ahead. It is also recommended to bring your theory certificate, although I've never seen one actually requested. Better to be safe than sorry. If you are coming in your own vehicle, you need to make sure it's clean, it's insured, it's a safe, roadworthy vehicle that is taxed and MOT'd. You will also need to make sure that you have a qualified supervisor. That means someone that is legally able to drive, etc. They meet all of the criteria. Do also make sure that you have an L plate on the back of your car and on the front of your car. In an ideal world, you would also have a spare central mirror, but this is not an absolute requirement, so don't panic if you don't have one. Just mention it to the examiner and they will make sure they bring one out. Finally, just to clarify, you do not need to worry about bringing a sat-nav. The examiner will supply one of those for you. When you go for your UK driving test, you are going to need to make sure that you have your provisional license or full license if you are retaking the test. Now, here's a bit of information about the UK driving test. So the UK driving test is anywhere between 35 minutes and 40 minutes. 20 minutes of this is going to be the independent drive, which involves either following a sat-nav or following road signs. The second 20 minutes will be clear instructions from the examiner. Now, don't panic about this. They are very good at giving instructions. They would not want you to fail your driving test because they gave you poor instructions. So all of the instructions will be very clear, such as please take the first exit at the roundabout going left, or please take the next road on the left. If the road signs are covered or not very clear, the examiner will help you with this and give you a bit of a heads up. So again, don't panic. Now, it is perfectly normal to be a little bit nervous for your driving test. In fact, nerves are quite good. They give us that edge. They make sure we're performing at our best. But too many nerves can be bad, and they can lead to mistakes. Now, try to remember the driving examiner is not there to fail you. So they are expecting you to be able to drive. They just want to make sure you are a safe and competent driver. Now, during your driving test, the driving test examiner will be watching in case you make any faults. Now, these are divided into three separate categories. You have your driving faults, which are also known commonly as minor faults. You have your serious faults, which are also commonly known as majors, and you have your dangerous faults. Now, your minor faults are common mistakes that shouldn't be high risk, such as forgetting to signal on the left, and it hasn't affected anyone. You can get up to 15 driving faults and still pass your driving test. Just to give you a bit of an idea, I have never actually had a student get 15 faults on a driving test. Has anyone else? Has anyone ever had a student fail for getting more than 15 driving faults? Let me know in the comments below. Serious faults, like the name suggests, are more serious. These are high-risk situations, such as pulling out of a junction too quickly and causing someone else to have to slow down, or pulling off from the side of the road and not actually checking the blind spot. This is going to create a high-risk situation because if you did that and a car was coming, obviously there'd be an accident. Finally, we have dangerous faults, and these are the sorts of faults that would potentially cause an immediate accident, such as pulling out on a roundabout that would potentially drive into someone. Something to be aware of, even if you do perform a serious fault on your driving test, which would lead to a driving test fail, you will be expected to continue to the end of the test. This is because, after all, you have paid for this experience with the examiner. You've paid for a driving test. You want the feedback from the driving test to find out what went well and what needs to be developed. Your job is just to stay calm, stay focused, and do your best driving around nice and safely. The first thing you're going to want to do on driving test day is check your email. If there's any extreme weather, such as snow, just severe weather conditions, for instance, if a driving test examiner is poorly, they may very well move or cancel your driving test. If that is the case, they will email you either on the day or the day before, so make sure you check your email and check your junk folder as well. Now, once you've checked your emails, you're happy, you've had your breakfast, you've had a drink, you're ready to go. I'd always suggest having an hour warm-up before your driving test, either warming up with doing some maneuvers or warming up doing any development points that you feel would help before the driving test. Now, I'd never suggest doing any longer than an hour because driving is tiring after all. That's why they suggest taking a break every 2 hours. And you want to be at your best. Once you've had your hour warm up before the driving test, you're going to want to head to the test center. Now, it's important that you try and get to the test center approximately 10 minutes before your driving test. This is going to help stop you from feeling anxious. It's going to give you a chance to pop to the toilet. It's going to give you those few minutes rest before the actual driving test. But saying that, try not to arrive any more than 10 minutes to the driving test in the car park, because other people could still be coming back from the test and you could put them off, which I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate. I know I wouldn't. Now we've arrived at the driving test center. Let's make sure that we reverse into one of the bays if there is a car park. If there's not a car park, let's just make sure that we park as close as we can that is safe and legal to the driving test center, and make sure the car is facing the direction that is away and not a blocked end. Hello? It's really important that you make sure your mobile's turned off. The last thing you need on your driving test is your mobile ring-a-dinging as you're going around. It's just going to put you on edge as well. So make sure you turn that off. Once you've parked up, let's go inside the test center. There are normally toilets in there, so if you're anything like me, you may want to use those before popping to the waiting room. Now, the waiting rooms are unfortunately normally deathly silent. I don't know why they don't just get a radio in there. Feel free to talk to the other people. Feel free to talk to your supervisor. Just have a chat and take a seat and wait. When it is your time, and don't worry if the driving examiner is a few minutes late, because they often are, the driving examiner will come through and they will call your name. This is your opportunity to get up and greet your examiner, preferably with your driving license in hand. Once they've checked your driving license, they're going to ask you to sign an insurance declaration. This is for you to sign just to say that your vehicle is insured and roadworthy to use. Once this is done, they will then ask you if you would like your supervisor to sit in on the driving test with you. This is up to you to say yes or no. They may also ask you at this point, would you like your supervisor to listen in to the feedback at the end of the test? Now, it may be tempting to say no, but I do not advise it, because trust me, at the end of that test, you are not going to hear a word that examiner says apart from pass or fail, which means you are going to need that supervisor to listen to the feedback. So if it's not the intended outcome, they know why and they can help you develop it. If you are struggling with the driving test, or you just want to give yourself the best possible chance to pass that test first time, have a look at our online driving course. Our online driving course is specifically designed to help you ace the driving test first time. Now, at this point, the examiner may tell you a little bit about the test if you ask for it. Otherwise, they'll suggest to carry on to the car park. Once you get to the car park, they are then going to perform the eyesight test. They're going to ask you to read a number plate from approximately 20 meters away. If you wear glasses, make sure you've got them on now, or contacts. Whatever happens, make sure you can read that number plate, because if you can't, the test will not be able to go ahead. With that done, the examiner will then ask you to go make yourself comfortable in the car. They may have a quick check around the car before jumping in themselves. Once the eyesight test is done, they then may very well ask you either a tell me question outside the car, especially if the weather's nice, or if it's not so nice, they may just ask you to jump in. Once the examiner's in the car with you, they are now likely to ask you a tell me question. These questions can be found on the .gov website in the description below with the answers as well. Now, don't panic if you don't get this question right, as it will only go down as one driving fault, although it doesn't make you look very prepared, and first impressions and all that do count. Now, 3 of the tell me questions include opening the bonnet. Can you open the bonnet and tell me how you'd know if you have sufficient engine coolant? Can you open the bonnet and tell me how you know if you have sufficient oil? Once the examiner jumps in, they will then set up the sat-nav, if you are following a sat-nav for the day. Once that's set up and they've pressed go, they will ask you to drive on when you're ready. Now, it's worth noting 4 out of 5 people on their driving test will be following a sat-nav for 20 minutes of the independent drive, while just 1 in 5 will be expected to follow road signs. Now, if you are expected to follow a sat-nav, all the information is going to be at the top of the sat-nav. Just make sure you're not staring at it and you are only glancing at it, because if you take your eyes off the road for too long, this becomes a distraction and it's going to lead to mistakes. If you look at the top of the sat-nav, it's going to constantly give you at least 2 steps ahead of where you are going next. The sat-nav will also talk to you, giving you some extra help to make sure you know where you're going. Now, I say this a lot, but it's a lot harder to follow on the day than it is to say. Don't worry if you go the wrong way. After all, the driving test is not about how good you are at following directions. It's about safety and minimizing risk. Provided you go the wrong way safely, you will not receive any faults at all. Again, if you're not sure about the direction or you want the examiner to repeat the direction, do just ask them to do just that. There'll be no issue with that at all. Let's go. Now, you're going to be expected to take your driving test on a variety of different road styles. For instance, you're more than likely going to have to drive in residential areas, lots of houses, maybe parked cars as well. You could also be expected to drive on busy roads such as town, such as busy cities. If there is a dual carriageway in the area, you will be expected to drive on a dual carriageway. And finally, if your driving test centre is near any country roads, you will be expected to drive on country roads as well. Now, don't get me wrong, you may not be expected to drive on all of those, depending on the test route, depending on the location. If you are in the middle of the Highlands on an island, there really isn't a particularly busy town or city anywhere nearby, and there may not be a dual carriageway as well. During the driving test, you are going to be asked to pull the car over to the side of the road at least 3 times. I say at least 3 times because if you are not performing something quite right, perhaps you haven't checked your mirror properly, or you haven't checked your blind spot, you may be asked to do this more. For instance, I've had one student that was asked to pull over 8 times and they just scraped through their driving test. Make sure that's not you. It's highly likely that you're also going to be asked to pull over reasonably close to another car to give you an angled start, and this is just to show the examiner that you are able to get out from reasonably tight spaces. It's highly likely you will be expected to do a hill start as well, just to show that you can stop the car safely on a hill and drive away on the hill as well. At some point during the driving test, you will be expected to perform one reverse parking maneuver as well. Now, this could be a forward bay park and reverse back out, or this could be a reverse bay park. This could also be a parallel park, or my favorite, pull over on the right hand side and reverse back 2 car spaces. Now, remember, the key to a successful maneuver is to stay calm and think about what you're doing. There is no need to turn this into a scene from Fast and Furious. Instead, you need to think like Slowpoke. When you are doing your driving test maneuvers, when you go slow, this shows the examiner that you have fantastic clutch control. If you go and try and do your maneuver quickly, this shows a lack of control to the examiner. And lack of control means risk. And if there's risk, you aren't going to get your driving license. Now, when your driving test comes to at the end, the driving examiner is going to direct you back to the test centre. Once you've parked up, they're going to put the sat nav away and they're going to ask you to turn your car off. Then they're going to give you your dreaded result. If you pass, congratulations! You are going to be able to start driving on your own. If you didn't pass, do not worry, you are able to take the test again in just 10 working days. And remember, failing the driving test doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a bad driver. I, for one, know when I was a young scallywag, it took me 3 attempts to pass my driving test, and that was a lot to do with driving test nerves. Now, you may just need a little bit more practice in certain areas, or it may just be a case of you made some particularly bad mistakes due to driving test nerves as well. Either way, the driving test examiner will let you know. I hope this helps, gives you a better understanding of what to expect on the UK driving test. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. If you are struggling with the driving test, or you just want to give yourself the best possible chance to pass that test first time, have a look at our online driving course. Our online driving course is specifically designed to help you ace the driving test first time. And on top of that, it's designed to help you save money on your driving lessons. Don't get me wrong, a huge amount of driving is about practice in the car, hands-on. But there is also a huge amount of theory to driving as well. Have a look, sign up, and get on that road to success. I am Josh, the driving instructor, and I'm out.